Good afternoon. This is Greg Giardino of the Atlas team here at Wealth Enhancement. And I'm joined here with my fellow teammate, Steve Craffen. And today we have a really special presentation for you. We're going to be talking about intelligent and impactful charitable giving. I know as we're getting into the thick of the holidays here in December, there's a lot of causes that many hold near and dear to their heart. And now is a great time to reflect on those charities or things that you hold very closely to your heart.
Yep.
How do you contribute and make an impact? And maybe have
And
a
on,
tax
on a
benefit.
side note, I just want to mention that if you're going to make a contribution, you have time to, get it in this tax year. You still have a couple of weeks left, which could be impactful on your taxes, depending upon how you do it.
Exactly. Time is running out. You got to get those contributions in before the end of the year. And for those of you who may not know, Steve and I, we regularly publish for MD Life, which is a magazine that focuses on medical doctors and some of the wealth tips that they can perhaps take advantage of. And this is a presentation off of the article we did last month. And
Yep.
what you'll learn today is some of the different strategies. We're going to take a deeper dive. And for those of you who may not know about our Atlas team at Wealth Enhancement, we are what's called fee-only financial advisors. So that simply means only the client, you, can compensate or pay us. So from a compensation standpoint, we cannot accept commissions. We do not sell any products. The advice we're going to be talking about is very general in nature. And that is really important to know, I think, if you decide to follow our content and ultimately maybe become a client of ours.
I like to tell our clients that we're their employee effectively. We're only paid by them.
We're their boss. So
exactly. So we don't want to be fired. We want to keep you happy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for those of you that really like what you hear today, you can feel free at the end of our recording that we'll have, it'll be up on our YouTube channel called It's Your Smarter Money. It will also be on the Wealth Enhancement YouTube channel as well. And feel free, you could schedule a complimentary consultation with us to maybe see how these charitable giving strategies may impact you.
Or any other area of your circumstance that you'd like perhaps second opinion on, or just have us take a look at. We do very detailed financial planning. I want to mention that, and probably more detailed than most firms will ever do. We consider various scenarios, and it's very detailed, and almost everything we do is backed by academic research as well. I wanted to mention that. So why don't we start?
With that being said, I will share my slide deck here. Let's talk more about intelligent ways to be giving this time of year. So just a quick background on our team here at Wealth Enhancement. Not only do we have a team of all certified financial planner professionals, which I think is really unique, but we also have a roundtable behind us. So if you're a medical doctor, you have a medical practice, and you're thinking about selling it at some point, having a business exit, or you have a succession plan, we have specialists on our team that can help you to craft out a plan for that.
Yep.
And I think because of the advanced services that our firm provides, we have very happy clients. So this number here just goes to show you that a lot of the Wealth Enhancement clients, they're happy and they stay around for a long time.
And our team, by the way, we're an independent team within a Wealth Enhancer group. Our retention rate's about 98% actually. It's been that way consistently for quite a long time actually, because we really care about our clients, and we're very high touch and very responsive to our clients on a continuing basis. If client calls us or sends an email, we're not available, within an hour or two, you're going to get some kind of response. We're very responsive.
And service is important.
Yeah, it is very.
So it's really important. You need to do your due diligence before you give to an organization that you hold near and dear to your heart. So there's some things you may want to consider. First off, well, what do you feel passionate about? Where do you want to give back to? So for some medical doctors, that could be the fight against cancer. American Cancer Foundation, maybe it's American Heart Foundation, or maybe it's something on a local level. So for example, maybe you're an animal lover. So Steve and I, we're proud dog owners, and shout out to a local animal shelter, no-kill animal shelter.
I just want to say, Greg, I have to interrupt you, because actually it's the other way around. The dogs own us.
Yes, they tell us what to do. They're in
Yeah.
charge. So there is a local animal shelter here, right here in Oakland, where we are, Ramapo Bergen Animal Shelter, that Steve and
A
I,
no-kill
we've
shelter.
personally given time and money to.
Yeah.
That's a cause we hold near and dear to our heart. So first, you have to figure out, well, where would you like to donate to? Who would you like to improve? And really, you have to have a good understanding of that organization's mission. Are they transparent? And a little pro tip we'll give you is you want to look at the organization's what's called Form 990. So every year, if you're a tax exempt organization, you have to file Form 990. And I think a good rule of thumb is when you review their file, it's really a good idea to make sure that at least 75% of their revenues are being spent on the mission that you're supporting.
And not administration.
So this is
Yeah.
really important, making sure that your dollars are making an impact. And additionally, there's some resources that you can also kind of fact check to see if those organizations are worthwhile. So we have here on the slides, you can go to charitynavigator.org, Charity Watch, and there's
Hmm.
also one not mentioned on here, GuideStar. So you can check them out. They give like a rating system to see if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, the impact those organizations are making, and if it's worth your charitable dollars.
Yep.
All right, so there's many ways to offer support. It's really good to start with a budget first. And if you haven't had a financial plan created for you yet, that's really
Yep.
important because you want to figure out what is your core wealth, the wealth that
Right.
you need to sustain your retirement, and then also what is the surplus wealth so that you can figure out what can you donate, not just maybe at the end of your plan, but maybe during your plan. You may want
And
to
it's
donate
important to
while
see
you're alive.
whether it's sustainable, and also you don't, as Greg said, you don't want it to impact your lifestyle. You don't want to give away so much that you're impacting yourself. You have to maybe want to look at your family too, your children, and also, and look and play it in terms of that view as well. You don't give away so much that you may hurt your legacy. So it's important to kind of look at those whatever some. I guess they kind of work at cross ends to each other, so you have to look at it carefully. And we do this detailed planning to help you do this.
Super important. So, what are some benefits of giving? So, if you donate to a charitable organization, you may be able to get a deduction against your income tax if you itemize. So, a lot of folks in 2025, the standard deduction that most take is about 31,500 if you're married filing jointly here in 2025.
Yep.
However, if you itemize deductions, there's a chance you may get higher than the standard deduction. So itemized deductions, that includes your charitable donations, that includes mortgage interest, that includes state and local taxes. Those will help get your itemized deductions higher.
Yep.
And one strategy you may want to utilize, and we have a case example to show you later in this presentation, but you may want to consider bunching your deductions, which simply means if you donate $10,000 to charity each and every year, well, maybe you want to make 2 years or 3 years or 4 years worth of gifts in 1 year so that you can get over that 31,500 standard
Yep.
deduction and maybe reap a tax benefit.
Yep.
And additionally, it's usually a good idea to bunch your deductions and maybe have a health surgery, if you will, or health event. So, for example, if you're putting off knee surgery, maybe you put it off in the same year as you're bunching deductions so that you can get a much higher threshold of these itemized deductions. Because normally, to deduct medical expenses, you can only do it over 7.5% of what's called your AGI, or adjusted gross income.
Yeah, actually modified, which, by the way, modified is a little different than AGI because modified includes interest on tax-free bonds, for example. So it has to exceed 7.5% of your MAGI. So
Very important. And then here, you
yeah.
can also potentially, if you donate to charity and you get more itemized deductions, well, that could help potentially lower, well, some other strategies. I'm sorry, I misspoke. There's some other strategies we'll talk about later on that could actually potentially lower your Medicare premiums or Medicare surcharges.
Right, but and I think that doesn't apply to people who are younger than 65 for the most part. So
Exactly. And we'll talk about that strategy. It's a qualified charitable distribution strategy. We'll save that for later.
right,
And then,
yep.
of course, if you gift, that can also help reduce your taxable estate. Give to charity now, get it out of your taxable estate.
Yeah, and I want to we're going to mention that further, but right now the on the federal level, the tax unless you're above probably about 31 million roughly, you're not going to have an estate tax problem. But if you're in New York State, which we're going to mention, New York State is a much lower threshold, by the way. It's somewhat over 7 million. I checked this morning. It's inflation adjusted. I think it's 7.5 million, perhaps. I think I looked at it, and the problem with that is you're not taxed on that first 7.5 million. But they have the craziest system I've ever seen. If you're $1 over that threshold, that entire number is taxed from the state tax level. And by the way, unlike on the federal estate tax, each person has an exemption amount of about 15 million. And if one spouse predeceases the other, you can effectively transfer that exemption amount to the remaining spouse to have a net of 30 million. You can't do that in New York. So if your state's over 7.5 million and you're a New York resident, you need to do some planning, which is different than if you're from most other states, quite honestly. So I just wanted to bring that up.
That New York cliff tax is serious and
It's
something that you need to plan for sure.
Yeah, it's terrible.
So we're not going to take a deep dive here. This is just a high overview. We're going to talk today
Yep.
about donor advised funds. What are those? What are QCDs or qualified charitable distributions? As Steve alluded to, that's for folks that are over 70 and a half. Steve will also talk about charitable remainder trusts and private foundations.
Yep.
So here's some tax smart ways to give to charity. And we're going to start first with itemizing and bunching your deductions. So we're going to take a visual example here. We like visuals. It's easy to understand. Let's assume for a second that you have 10,000 in state and local taxes. You have 4,000 in mortgage interest. And if you look at column 1 in year 1, you'll see what would happen if you're married filing jointly and you took the standard deduction in 2024, which is 29,200. But if you itemize, well, you can only itemize 10,000 plus 4,000, 14,000. You're going to take the standard deduction, right? But if you look at year 2, what happens if we bunch our deductions? What if we take 20,000 and we gift it to charity? Well, then we could have 34,000 in itemized deductions. So this is where the power of planning comes in.
Yep.
If you look at year 1 and year 2, in year 1, you take the standard deduction 29,200. In year 2, you take the itemized deduction of 34,000. That is 63,200 in deductions you can take versus 58,400 in those 2 years.
Yep.
So this could be very powerful planning, and it could result in additional tax savings.
Now, I want to mention something here is that we help all of our clients with tax planning, not preparation. We're not tax preparers, but we help with clients with tax planning. So we have pretty sophisticated software that we can use to run through various scenarios and various ways of trying to do things like this, bunch deductions and other things to try to save money for you on income tax. So that's it definitely is a pretty advanced service we provide to all of our clients.
Yeah. And in this situation, it can result in almost $5,000 additional in itemized deductions. And for somebody in a high tax
Yep.
bracket, could be thousands of dollars. And this is just one example.
Yep.
All right. So you can donate appreciated assets. So if you have a taxable brokerage account and you have a high concentrated position, let's say NVIDIA, you have Google, you have Apple, well, perhaps there's a smarter way of donating that, because if you sell it now, you may have to pay a very high unrealized capital gain. So what you could do is, instead of, let's say in this example here, $10,000 and you pay $15,000 in capital gains tax, well, net after tax, you have $8,500 that you'd be able to donate to charity. Well, what if you just donated directly to charity?
The shares.
Well, then the charity of your choice, they could receive $10,000 worth of a full deduction. And then you can also technically not have to pay the capital gains tax. So it's a win-win for both you and the charity.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, we've done a video on this. It's dangerous to have concentrated stock positions. So that's one possible way of gradually reducing that concentrated position. As I mentioned, we did a whole video on this, and we could share the link for that video.
Now, for those medical doctors that are 70 and a half or over, you have a very special and powerful strategy for donating. This is called the qualified charitable distribution. So many of you may have, especially if you're affiliated with a hospital at a academic university, you may have a 403B plan. You may have access to a deferred compensation 457 plan. You cannot perform a qualified charitable distribution from a 403B or 457 plan. It has to come from what's called an IRA, or individual retirement account. So what happens is essentially you take your monies from your IRA, and in this case, most folks, they may have what's called a required minimum distribution. So that's money that you have to mandatorily take out once you hit a certain age. So
and that begins 73, I think, for most people. I think there's some people are still 75, right? But most are 73 now, I think, is when you have to start to take those distributions. There is another way around it, so you're still working, by the way. We can talk about that at some point.
So what you could do is, instead of taking your required minimum distribution, let's say for $100,000, you can donate a portion of it or all of it up to $108,000 here in 2026. I'm sorry, in 2025. And that can go directly to charity, directly to a 501c3 organization, and be excluded from your income.
And by the way, that has to go directly. You can't get the money, then donate it. It has to come directly out of your IRA right to the charity.
No, that's a great point there. And this is a nice way of lowering your taxable income.
And it does. And also what it does, it gives you a deduction, but it lowers in the future the amount of required minimum distributions you may have. So what I recommend, you do some planning around this and look at it and see what the effect is long term.
And this is just a chart for those of you not familiar with the required minimum distribution. Essentially, when it starts out, you have to take out around 4% of your account value. And then it's not until you reach your 90s where you're taking out closer to 10%. So for a lot of medical doctors that have saved a lot of money, they may not need all the income that their required minimum distribution produces. So there could be some savings here.
Right. Yep.
Now, how do you actually report a qualified charitable distribution? Well, it's your responsibility to do so, and you need to tell your tax preparer that you made a QCD for the year. Because if you don't, what happens is when you pull money out of your IRA, that is coded on what's called a 1099-R form as a normal distribution, which is taxable. So it is your job to tell your tax preparer that you made a QCD, and this is how you do it. If you look at this tax return here on the line 4A, you're going to write down your IRA distribution for the year. Let's pretend it's $10,000. Now, if you want to donate $10,000 directly to charity, you need to write on your tax return or your tax preparer the words QCD next to line 4B, the taxable amount. This way, they know it is a QCD. Now, if you donate more, let's say you took $20,000 out of your IRA and you only want to donate $10,000, well, the net difference, $10,000, will now be on that line 4B form. So this is really important. Coming into next year, they're starting to roll out requirements for custodians like Fidelity, Charles Schwab, to now offer something called Code Y, which would designate this as a QCD. So maybe it will help, but for now you have to be writing QCD down. Yeah. And also you have to keep in mind there's something called the IRS first dollars out rule. And what that says is in any given year, if you have a required minimum distribution, let's say hypothetically 100,000 you need to take out, and in January of 2026 you take out that $100,000 first, and in February you say, well, I'd really like to make a QCD, qualified charitable distribution. Well, you just lost your opportunity to have that minimize or mitigate your QCD. So what that means is in any given year, the first dollars you take out, they're designated to count towards satisfying your required minimum distribution. So if you're going to make a QCD, you got to make it before you take the entire RMD out.
That's a really important point. Yep.
Now, we just talked about it. You have to be over 70 and a half. You cannot take it from your 403B or 457 or 401k. It's got to come from an IRA. And here's another little pro tip. If you have an inherited IRA, you may want to take the QCD from there. Why? Most of the heirs or most of your beneficiaries now, because of the Secure Act 2.0, may have to take their inherited IRA money out over the course of 10 years.
Well, they have an inherited IRA that applies to them. So, yep.
So you could actually take a QCD from your inherited IRA. That may be a savvy move as well.
Yeah. Yep.
And you cannot transfer a QCD to a donor advised fund. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And the pros of doing a qualified charitable distribution is it may reduce IRMA or these Medicare premiums. I just reviewed my mother's Medicare form that came out. Usually comes out around November, and it will tell you if you owe Medicare premiums starting next year. And guess what? The Medicare premiums my mom has to pay are $470 a month. So this is a big deal. You want to make sure.
By the way, I just want to mention, I think the top number is about over $700 a month per person. If you're in a really high bracket, yeah, very high. So you're looking at what, $1,400 a month potentially, and multiply that by 12, right? So you're looking at 17, 18,000 a year, and that's only for Part D. You also have Part D as well. That also will have that.
It's a real IRMA can be a real bear. Now, it can also help QCDs reduce potentially the net investment income tax, which is an extra 3.8% tax on any investment income you have.
Right.
And we talked a little bit about the benefits here. I won't go into it anymore. Now, let's talk about a donor advised fund. So what is that? A donor advised fund is really a giving account. So you're basically setting up an account. You're funding it with assets. It could be cash. It could be investments.
Yep.
And like the word says, donor advised, you're advising charities on how the money should be investing. You're actually recommending grants.
Yeah. Well, the way it works, we have some now. And so it's actually an account at the custodian. And you have, by the way, I just want to mention up front, once you make these transfers into that account, it's irrevocable. You can't get the money back. So don't ever put in cash or securities you think you may need. And so you can transfer securities directly into this. And then what happens is if you liquidate a piece of the account to donate to a charity, and you could donate to charities whenever you want, or whichever charities you want to donate out of that fund, those investments are sold to provide that cash, but there's no capital gains or income tax on any of that once you put it, because you already got the deduction for the money you put in the DAF. And once it's in the account, basically it can grow tax-free, and you can sell things and not have any capital gain, as I mentioned. So there's a lot of advantages to a DAF. And what's nice about it gives you control from the aspect that every year you can decide, all right, I'm going to give $5,000 to Make-A-Wish, argument's sake, or I'm going to give $5,000 to the American Cancer Society. And so you have a lot of control, and eventually you may deplete the account, but but you put enough in and it grows reasonably well. It could persist for a long time. And we have some clients now that do it, and it's been in there for several years. They've been making many contributions a year to charities out of it.
And I just want to focus on 2 points you made, Steve. One is you get an immediate tax deduction in the year of contribution. Yep. So in essence, you could say, well, I'm not going to give any grants to any other charities. You could wait 5-10 years, and then you could start to send the money out. And then you also made a good point. You could let it sit in the account and grow as you're investing it in these different mutual funds or ETFs.
Or stocks or whatever you want.
And give more to charity. So it's a really nice way to give.
Yep.
Now, the benefit of working with our team is that we can run a pro forma to show you, well, what are the tax implications if I do contribute to a DAF? So that's the real nice thing. We can show you before and after, so you can make an educated decision. Yep. And another cool feature of opening up a DAF is that you get one receipt. So maybe you want to contribute to 4, 5, 10 different charities. Everything gets consolidated from an administrative standpoint. So this can be very advantageous.
But just keep in mind, you get the deduction for, but we can make additional contributions to a DAF once you have it set up. Unlike some other types of, which we're going to get into in a minute, like a charitable trust, you can contribute more money in the future to the DAF. It doesn't have to be a one-shot deal. But once you make that contribution, it shows up in the year you make it. So even though you're donating to charities each year out of the DAF, you only get the deduction when you've made the contribution to the DAF.
And just know that many popular discount investment firms offer DAFs. So for example, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, Vanguard,
Yep.
they all have their charitable departments, and they all have their different fees and things and minimums. And our firm has done due diligence on those to see what those fees are. And once again, if you set up a consultation with us, we can advise you on what some of those nuances and differences are when you open up a DAF.
And by the way, our practice has been, which I've done for clients who set up a DAF, that even though we're helping manage that account, we do not charge on that account, because that's our contribution to the charity. That's how I always viewed it, to help.
All right, so I'm going to swing things over to my teammate Steve here, and he could talk more about charitable remainder trusts.
So yeah, you can let's go to the next slide. So charitable remainder trusts are a very, very interesting technique. So here's the way they work. You set up a trust, and there's two types, which I'm gonna cover in a minute. And you can donate assets to this trust. It needs to be set up legally. You need to go have probably a law firm draft the trust document, and there's certain guidelines they have to follow from an IRS standpoint. And so you can donate, for example, let's just say you have a highly appreciated stock. You have Apple stock, and you have I've seen this with people. They have a cost basis of $100,000 and the stock's worth $1 million because it grew so much. And I alluded to earlier the danger of having concentrated stock positions, because it is dangerous. But you're nearing retirement, or for other reasons, you want to try to translate that into something that pays income to you. But you don't want to lose, arguments say 23.8% of it by federal loan. You add New Jersey or New York to you're giving up about 30% of its value when you sell, roughly. Okay. So what you can do is you can actually transfer something like that to a charitable remainder trust. Now, the charitable remainder trust can provide you with income in your lifetime, but the remainder at your death or to some stated period of time has to go to a charity. But the nice part about this is you can actually donate it to the trust. You can sell that highly appreciated asset within the trust and now reinvest it in a diversified portfolio and reduce a lot of investment risk, and also get an income stream for a period of years or your lifetime from the trust. But with an income stream that'll be a lot safer to get than if you held that highly concentrated stock position. And arguments say 20 years or 30 years down the line, a charity will receive what's left in the trust. And so it accomplishes a lot of the goals we already talked about. So as I mentioned, yeah, perfect. What I mentioned is that there's two types of charitable remainder trust. Somebody back up one slide, Greg, again. Yeah, thank you. So again, I mentioned that the tax benefits are that you can convert those assets, a highly concentrated stock position, into something that's a lot more diversified without paying capital gains tax. And that's huge. It really is. Okay. And so you can get either a fixed annual amount of income, or you can get something based on the value of the assets within the trust. And those are the two main types of charitable remainder trusts. One's called a CRAT. It's a charitable remainder annuity trust. And the other is called a CRUT. That's a charitable remainder unit trust. Okay. And the difference is a CRAT, you get the same fixed dollar amount of income each year. With the CRUT, you get a percent of the assets each year in income. So you have a little bit more risk with a CRUT in terms of variability of your income, but on the other hand, you have the potential for your income stream to grow. Okay, so that's the advantage. And the other thing is you could also consider setting up too. If you want a steady fixed income, set up a CRAT. And then because you do want some COLA and some cost of living adjustments in your income stream, do a CRUT and have one of each, depending. So you have a nice solid base of income from that highly appreciated asset. and you also know that you also have income that can grow with inflation. So if it's invested properly, with the growth in assets. So, and so the other thing, by the way, I'm going to mention that when you donate these assets to these charitable remainder trusts, those assets are also out of your estate. They're no longer considered part of your estate from an estate tax view. So, and that's not an issue, of course, if you're on a federal level. You're not in New York, really, and most states don't have a state tax any longer, by the way, because you have a $30 million exemption amount for a couple on a federal level. As I mentioned, New York, though, that's where you have a problem. If you're a resident of New York, you only have $7 million per person, and it's not portable. So you still really want to consider some advanced estate planning techniques if you're in New York, and especially with the fact that it's a cliff. $1 over the 7 million, your estate owes estate tax on the entire 7 million, which is crazy. If you $1 below the 7 million, it's roughly 7.5 million now, so it's inflation adjusted. But you $1 under that threshold amount, no estate tax. I mean, it's crazy. But so if you're in New York, this is something to seriously consider, especially if you do have some sort of concentrated investment position. So I kind of talked about this. You have an inflation hedge with the CRAT. With the CRUT, not so much with the CRAT, but as I mentioned, you can consider, doing both, quite honestly. And so here's an example. So suppose somebody has $1 million in highly appreciated stock, okay? And so you donate it to a CRUT, okay? You sell the stock, there's no capital gain, so that CRUT has $1 million to invest in a diversified portfolio, okay? Could be a combination of stocks and bonds, ETFs, mutual funds, whatever it is. And it could be custody at any custodian for the most part. Typically, you will have some sort of trust company that monitors it and performs the accounting associated with it, by the way, too. There's typically 3 parties to it. There have to be trustees, of course, too. And I don't want to speak from a legal standpoint. I believe you could be one of the trustees, but you may need to have a second trustee. But again, I don't want to speak from a legal standpoint. But typically with a trust like this, you need an adverse party to be one of the trustees. But by the way, I want to recommend one thing is a lot of times people will combine the role of trustee and also investment advisor. I don't recommend you do that with any kind of trust. And the reason is you want to have that a trustee that doesn't have a conflict of being the investment advisor as well. So a lot of times I've seen people choose large firms like JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs as in both roles. But the problem is if they don't perform that well as an investment advisor, you can't get rid of them. It's almost impossible to get rid of them without going to court because they're also a trustee. Whereas if you have those roles separate, and so for example, you hire us, the Atlas team and Wealth Enhancement Group as the investment advisor, and if I don't do a good job, your trustee can fire us. And so that's a huge advantage. Don't ever combine those roles in our view, trustee and investment advisor, okay? And so let's just say year 2, the trust assets grow to 1.1 million. And so you're getting a 5% payout. Now you're getting 55,000 for that year. All right. And so over 20 years, you're going to be getting income for those 20 years. And as an example, you may still have about $500,000 left at the end to donate to the charity. Okay. And there's a certain valuation that's performed when you donate assets to a charitable remainder trust, any either type. That values what the potential remainder interest to the charity will be. And that's what you get a deduction for on your taxes, that number. And there's IRS and mortality tables that come into play. It becomes a little complex. But you do get a charitable deduction by making this contribution. And again, it's valued as the potential future value of the assets that are going to go to the charity at your death or at the end of the payout stream, 20 years, whatever the case may be.
And Steve, before I move on,
yeah, jump in.
I want to circle back that you made with not having that conflict of interest between the trustee and the investment advisor.
Yep.
There's an additional person you can name or agent called a trust protector that maybe sits above the trustee and the investment advisor, who can also act as a form of checks and balances that if you name this third party, they can actually fire the trustee if they're not doing their job, or they can fire or manage the investment advisor. So that's another little quick tip we'll share with you as well.
Yep. And by the way, if you're interested in doing something like that, obviously we're not lawyers and we're not going to draft documents, but we can help assist you in deciding what you can safely donate to these trusts. And also we can run projections of what income you'll get and that type of thing. But we also have a stable of third-party advisors to help with this too, including attorneys and others to help draft this document. And it's really a one-off. You really need to draft it for you. They will attorneys will probably use some standard documents to start out with, but there are all legal costs associated with it. And you also will have some accounting costs too for the trust. And also I think they do. I'm not an expert on that aspect of it, but I think they do have to do some type of tax return each year too. Is my belief, even though the income within that charitable remainder trust is not taxed. Okay, and so you can see that the payout rate can range from 5 to 50% of the trust value. That's the IRS rule. Obviously, with 50%, that the trust is not going to last long, and also the actual tax deduction you're going to get for that is going to be small because the remainder amount going to the charities is going to be quite small. So I think probably between 5 to 8% annual is pretty reasonable, especially based on investment returns. Especially if you want a larger charitable deduction, and also you really want to benefit the charity. But keep in mind, the charity is not going to benefit for a number of years. So you want to benefit a charity right away. You want to consider perhaps doing this and perhaps some other methods, as Greg mentioned earlier. Okay, all right. Yeah, and so also now private foundations are interesting. You can go past this, Greg. Private foundation is actually almost like an organization you create, whereas a charitable remainder trust, for example, there's a lot of restrictions once you name the charities. I'm not sure whether they have to be named at the beginning or not. I don't recall. That's something we could check on. But with a private foundation, you get a lot of the benefits of a charitable remainder trust to some extent, but you also have the ability of actually having it act like as an omnibus charity, giving out to different charities over the years, by the way. And it's sort of self-sustaining. You donate assets to it, but there are some IRS rules. Now we cover this. We're not exactly experts on private foundations. It's something I would bring in a legal expert on this, but we just wanted to cover this from the standpoint of being complete. But I do know of a couple of people that do have private foundations. And you can actually get salaries from the private foundation, by the way, too. So there are some ways that you can actually benefit from it too financially. But again, we're not experts on that, but this is something you can consider, and we would bring in some outside experts to assist you with this, by the way. And so there are some IRS rules. There's a 5% minimum requirement. And by the way, private foundations do have to pay an excise tax, which is interesting. And we're going to show it on another chart. I think it's 1.6 or 1.9% per year, which is interesting, on their income to the IRS, by the way. But, it's a lot more complex, this type of thing. A foundation, you can back up a slide, Greg. It's some of the complexities. You have to donate at least 5% annually to charities, by the way. And you do have detailed financial reporting, annual reports here. So it's, I probably wouldn't consider something like this unless you're considering multi-millions because of the costs associated with it. And as I mentioned, they do pay an excise tax on investment income. Okay. And you have to be careful with self-dealing because in effect, you are running the foundation to qualify, as effectively a nonprofit on your own. You have to be careful about self-dealing. Okay. All right. Okay, and it's important, yeah, and I agree with this. You have to make sure you align, and this goes for any type of charitable contribution, I think. And Greg brought this up, and he made a good point about this. You want to really make sure that the not just the foundation, but any charities you donate to really align with your personal family values. And by the way, and this may sound funny, but sometimes we help clients decide what their values are, and there's some exercises we can help you go through to help decide what your values are, and help you align your values with your actions. And that's an important thing. And we think it's also important from a standpoint of financial planning and also deciding how you should be invested. So we do help clients with that. So, all right. Okay. And so, as I mentioned, tax foundations do grow. The assets do generally grow without, at least with a low amount of taxes like that, other than that excise tax. And they do compound over time. And you can invest them. You have great the ability to really diversify among many different types of investments, pretty much the entire universe of investments also. So, So do have a comparison of strategies. Greg, if you want to bring up that other document we have, and we can, by the way, we can send this document to anybody who's interested. Happy to do it, that we created. This just shows some of the trade-offs, some of the definitions, the tax deductions here, which I'm not going to get into right now because that's another whole conversation. But you can see there's different levels of deductions in relation to your adjusted gross income in terms of what you donated and how you donated it. And you see the tax benefits here. With DAF, it's really you avoid capital gains, tax-free growth, and with the qualified charitable deduction from an IRA, it reduces your adjusted gross income and helps satisfy your RMD, as Greg mentioned. With the CRT and also with the private foundation, you avoid capital gains there again on concentrated positions, which is really a huge benefit. But you also have the estate tax benefits as well. And as I mentioned, I'm going to repeat it again. If you're in New York State, these are things to certainly consider, especially for a highly compensated medical professional. You're probably going to be building up a pretty high net worth through time. And unless you move out of New York, you may want to consider these. And the only thing that has a minimum age really is the QCD. It's 70 and a half. Okay. And as you can see that you have a lot of flexibility, in particular with the DAF and the foundation, some control with the CRT, but not quite as much. All right, in terms of control over who gets the contribution, the contribution to the charity, and also how it's invested, that type of thing. So,
and then it goes on a little bit more, right, Steve?
Yeah, and I'm just going to go through some of this quickly. There's contribution limits for a DAF. It's in relation to your AGI, and the QCD is 108,000 per person, which is what you said, Greg, right? 108 for 2025. But there's no limit on what you contribute to a CRT, and I think there's some limits apparently on the foundation. Again, AGI caps. Okay, and as I said, the DAF and the QCD are pretty low in terms of complexity, but a charitable remainder trust and also a foundation. Now you are getting into a whole nother level, especially with the foundation, possibly not as much with the CRT, but the foundation is another whole level of complexity. And that's why I wouldn't recommend that unless you have multi-millions for a foundation at least. And the costs are high for a foundation and relatively high for a CRT, at least initially. There's higher upfront costs with a CRT, but you do have continuing costs possibly for a trustee and an investment advisor and so forth. As I say here, as I mentioned, who these best for? Well, DAF is pretty good for a lot of people, quite honestly. The QCDs, based on your tax situation and the level of your RMDs, could be for a lot of people as well. The CRT as well, depending. Especially if you have highly concentrated positions. But the foundation, I think, is very unique and it's a very specialized technique. I think you have to look at the costs involved in that and the complexity, and it does require ongoing work, whereas the CRT really doesn't. Foundation's very different. So, okay, you can go back to the other. So I guess this is a summary here. So I do think you want to be careful when you contribute to any charity, as Greg said very well early on. You want to look at that charity carefully. And again, as I mentioned, make sure it aligns with your feelings and goals and and how you identify with the mission of that charity. For example, Make-A-Wish is, my opinion, it's a great charity, what they do for children. And I do have some personal experience with it, so I'm a little biased. And the same with the CF Foundation, but also American Cancer Society. There are a lot of really great charities, and the one Greg brought up also, which is a charity as well, the animal shelter over here in Oakland. And what we love about them is that they're a no-kill shelter. So we donate to them because we like their mission, we like the way they do things and their whole approach. So that's really important. And there are a lot of great charities out there. I just highlighted some. And also it may make sense to come up with a long-term gifting strategy and make sure it really fits in with your plans in terms of when you want to retire, what legacy you want to leave for your children as well, other things. So, and also, and to bring up another point, sometimes you can also help by being a volunteer for some of them too. I also want to call it a charity. Some of our clients are involved in, call them Homeless Solutions too in Morristown, and we've donated to that charity as well. They help people that are pretty down and out. I like their motto. It's not a handout. It's a hand up. They try to help you up effectively. So,
Great cause.
and to bring it. Oh, go ahead, Greg. Sorry.
No, I just said it's a great cause.
Yeah, it is. It is a great cause. And and you got to, there's a good point here. If charity can't tell you how the money was used, look at another one. So, and this is just shows you the team members on our Atlas team. We have 2 offices, one in New Jersey, one in Sarasota, Florida. The New Jersey office is in Oakland. And I want to mention again, this also shows you some of our background. And Greg can talk a little bit more about his, but I'll just mention that I'm originally an electrical engineer. I actually did a graduate work in physics and engineering, believe it or not. But I have an MBA in finance, a master's in financial planning, and I'm also a chartered financial analyst, a CFP, and a couple other designations. And Greg, we're all CFPs, by the way, as well, except for Barbara's administrative. But Greg is a CFP, and Greg, you're a CPWA, which you can outline to me what that is better than I can. It's another advanced designation, though.
Yeah, no, it's just for advanced planning for clients who have high net worth. So if they're between 5 million and 100 million, I have a resource I've studied in that to be able to help those folks. And
high net worth people.
Like Steve, give back to the community here. I'm also on the board of the Financial Planning Association. I'm on the board of the Greater Pascagoula Valley Chamber of Commerce here. Yep. Additionally, I'm very fortunate that I've been recognized for some of my work in the field. And Steve and we focus on medical doctors. So,
and I do want to mention too, Greg, that's a really good point because we're also involved in the profession. I was actually chair of the national board for NAFA about 8 years ago. And and we have received multiple awards. Greg just got an award, I think, from Investment News. And, I received one about a year ago from Think Advisor, a thought leader of the year within a profession. So, we both Greg has been recognized a lot of late. We've both been recognized within the profession because we also believe in giving back to this profession. And we believe it is a profession. It's become one over the last 20, 30 years. Whereas opposed to 40 years ago, you just had stockbrokers. You have many, it's become a true profession now, and I know medical professionals understand the concept of a profession because there are definitions of what is a profession, so. And so, by the way, I want to mention that we if you're interested in speaking to us, and even if it's a 10-minute call, we're happy to speak to you. There's no, we're not going to charge you, obviously. But if you're interested in considering us, our services, we're happy to give you a no-cost consultation, either virtually or in person, depending, and we can give you a good idea and see whether we can help you. If we don't need our help, we'll let you know. We're very honest, so.
And for those of you that really enjoyed this presentation, we'll be uploading it to the Wealth Enhancement YouTube channel and also the It's Your Smarter Money YouTube channel. Feel free, you could send this video over to a friend or a colleague who you think could benefit from some of these financial strategies and charitable strategies. And also, please email us directly, Steve or I, if you'd like that quick little cheat sheet of the different charitable strategies as well.
Yeah, I just want to mention our email. I'm not sure if they have it. Mine's skraffen@wealthenhancement.com. And Greg's is Greg, G or Dino, how you pronounce G. I'll have you spell it, Greg.
You're butchering it here. No, it's it's Giardino and
Giardino.
G, so it's GGIARDINO at wealthenhancement.com.
Yep.
And we hope you enjoyed the presentation today. We hope you reach out here, and we're happy to set up that initial complimentary meeting. And until next time, we'll see you soon. Take care. End event.
End event. Okay, ended. All right, did it. Okay, good.